Chapter 3. The world song moves us, speaks to us. Touch the rocks, young warrior, and you will feel it vibrate the very stone. When the metal glutton comes, you will know it is time to fight for this world. Prophecies of Arlunica of Keferil, Tablet 7, Inscription 7. Trazyn did not, on the whole, enjoy being dead, which is why, unlike the Eldari sorceress, he'd made contingencies. His consciousness rushed into the Lichguard captain's mind, overriding the native personality and banishing it to the depths of the captain's engramic databanks. Depending on the host, this could be a struggle, but the captain had awoken from stasis, damaged and simple, an easy takeover. It was a state Trazyn preferred in his companions, to be honest, since it made them less likely to speak of what they'd witnessed. The awakened council knew of Trazyn's projects and his galleries, but not everything he collected would meet their approval. And they would particularly disapprove of awakening their kin early and getting them destroyed for a personal venture like this. Within a second, he reshaped the captain's malleable necrodermis, the living metal flowing and changing to take on Trazyn's familiar shape. His hood sprang up segment by segment, rising over his head as the Lichguard's death mask rearranged into his own features. A cloak grew out from his shoulders, each scale popping into existence with a little ping. Then he gained vocal control. The first thing he said was, "Damn." His newly hijacked oculars told him that things were no longer running to plan. 4 Lichguard lay on the steps, sparking green, their metal flesh attempting to knit together despite horrendous wounds. The shuriken fire was a torrent now, coming from every angle. Skirmishers fired and moved in blurs so fast Trazyn could barely see their troop type. One doom scythe wobbled by, its exterior choked by pterosaurs that had hooked onto its superstructure, digging into the wires and its exposed cockpit. As he watched, one took the pilot's head in its beak, and with a twist of its long neck, snapped it away. The doom scythe lost control and tumbled into the rainforest like a tossed coin. It struck the plaza and ploughed through a bone god column before detonating in a superheated blast of smoke and emerald lightning. He had brought a team of only 30 Lichguard, a night scythe for transport, and 2 doom scythes for aerial cover. The sort of force that would not raise any alarms among the council upon its awakening. Even for the Eldari, whose speed made them dangerous, that was generally enough. A shock assault force to secure the target, or create a diversion while Trazyn recovered the specimen, on a normal acquisition. They were on the ground for no longer than an hour, often half that. They usually withdraw just as the locals mounted a response, but the counterattack had been almost instantaneous, as if the Eldari had detected the Necron air assets or sensed the distortion of the Night Scythe's transport wormhole. Or they foresaw me coming, Trazyn thought. Cursed witches. A pterosaur, its hide painted ochre with handprints, dived into the formation and snatched up the Lichguard like a bird of prey taking a rodent. It flew the struggling warrior up into the air, its rider leaning out of the saddle, almost upside down to riddle the Necron with the dual shuriken pistols. Then the beast dropped him some 300 cubits to the plaza flagstones. Trazyn saw more pterosaur riders coming in, a V in the sky, preparing to heel over and dive. Fall back, he called. Fall back inside the temple. Defend the sanctum. Beware aerial attacks. The force retreated in lockstep, without a glance backwards to place their feet. He summoned his empathic obliterator, the long haft of the weapon starting in his palm and building itself one atom at a time until it stood 8 feet tall from pointed base to the glowing jade wings of its head. Trazen swept it over his formation, doubling their marching speed, and then pointed the obliterator's inbuilt resurrection orb to the fallen Lich Guard, watching as the shattered bodies glowed with arcane energies, spines snapping and joints popping as bent limbs straightened and dismembered pieces flew together as if magnetized. As the tide of Eldari surged up the steps, a Lich Guard sprang back to its feet among them, one arm still missing. Its hyperphase sword carved bloody crescents into the Exodites. The Eldari skirmishers fell upon him, and the other rising dead, piercing their metal bodies with knives. That should stall them, Trazen said, and turned back into the temple. He passed the outer sanctum of coral statuary, trampled through the rain of poisoned darts in the corridor, and pushed the hammer column, still locked in stasis, contemptuously aside. This time he uttered no riddle. He simply took his obliterator in both hands and brought it down on the join. Legend held that the weapon contained a relic from a long-vanished species, a talisman of power designed to break the minds and souls of lesser races. That seemed, as far as Trazen was concerned, accurate. The great winged staff had connected with a lightning flash, and the acrid smell of disintegrated stone and energy discharge rocked the huge gates on the hinges, blowing them backwards and spreading cracks for 5 cubits down the wraithbone floor. Trazen strode out on the causeway and saw what he'd expected. The knights in formation already urging their slavering beasts on towards him, and the Farseer behind, her Carnosaur's footfalls shaking the chamber, roaring its defiance through teeth stained with its own blood and blackened by the fire of Trazen's last death. As much as he hated them, they were exquisite. Burnished wraithbone helms, millions of years old, shining in the watery light of the platinum pools, lance pennants woven from void silk, insubstantial as smoke, streaming, the terrible majesty of the mutated Carnosaur, and the regality of its rider, her shoulders burdened with a cloak fashioned from the plumage of native birds. They made the causeway bored down on him. He, in turn, held up a cube darker than the emptiness of space. Prismatic light speared out in a beam, danced on the lead rider, then spread an arc. Questing, analyzing, measuring the dimensions of each rippling muscle and strand of perfumed hair. A keening whine emanated from the box. It shook in Trazen's mechanical grip. He triggered the lock. The charge stopped. It did not falter or pull back. It merely ceased movement. Raptors froze mid-leaf. The Carnosaur's bellow was cut off. All was still, save for the void silk banners, which, due to their unusual physical properties, continued to slowly ripple in a non-existent wind. And then it was all gone. All of it. Not even a scent remained. Trazen walked through the empty air and approached the wild spirit. He so disliked to run, but the shortness of time hastened his footsteps. "Do not worry," he said to the cube, which burned so cold that none but a Necron would be able to hold it. "You will not be separated from your beloved gem." Trazen plunged a fist through the ancient Carnosaur's skull. Its brittle structure cracked and sundered under the blow. Eldari souls rushed up from the fractured calcium like embers, drifting out of whatever wraithbone had been woven around and through it. He He closed his hand around the gem and pulled it free. His hand did not curl and blacken. His back teeth did not go white hot. His bones did not crack. And he had no regrets. Until, at least, he received the security alert. Something had broken loose on Solemnace. It was easier if he focused on small things. The whirl of the cosmos was too fast, too chaotic. There was no order of operation, like a neurocircuit full of tangled wires. It was impossible to know where each led until you took it between your fingers and followed it. Knowing where to start was the hard part. So he started from the beginning, where all matter lay in the same place, orderly, satisfying, nothing but oneness and potential energy. The last moment when the universe was truly at peace. He savoured it. Aware that it was not real. Indeed, there was no guarantee the universe began this way at all. It was merely an engram simulation of a theorem, a meditative aid authentic enough to trick his own mind into emptying so he could feel the flows of time and matter during powerful rituals. Whole solar cycles would pass with him in this state. He let it happen. An explosion. He screened out the noise and clutter, focusing on what he wanted to find. Saw it. Followed it. A single particle tumbled through the dark. Then light was born, and he saw the little mote whisked away on the eddies of the void, collecting with other particles of its type. Watched ages passed as it built from a speck to a rock to a meteorite. Watched it, haloed by flame, enter the atmosphere and bury itself in the nameless continent. Watched as a Necron extractor wraith bored the meteorite free. Necrodermis can be reused an infinite number of times. The particle was first embedded in the hip joint of a warrior. Then a monolith's hull. A piece of jewellery lost and recycled. Then, yes, there it was. Inside a cable, in a doorway, neurocircuitry panel, ancient, faulty, its alloy impure from the moment of creation untold ages ago. Stressed from overuse, half-life draining, waiting for the moment it was fated to be short. He reached out with a spectral hand and helped the moment come. Glyphs, each as tall as the intruder, lit up in 2 rows, sigils of protection, threatening death to any that dare enter without the assent of Trazyn, overlord of Solemnace. The threat might have been more potent if the glyphs themselves were not guttering like lamp wicks in the gale. The electrical fault cascading throughout the gateway. Finally, the great slab ground backwards and parted between the columns of glyphs. Each massive piece separating and sliding behind the inner wall of the chamber. Trazyn had been collecting artifacts for his gallery for eons. Now, not even the dead gods themselves knew how long. And while he knew his collection better than any being alive, the sprawling complex of halls and exhibition spaces was as much a labyrinth to him as it was to the intruder. Architect wraiths followed standing orders to build outward, meaning that the facility sprawled in every direction, with chambers Trazyn himself had never commissioned or visited. Some proved perfect housing for new acquisitions, while others languished, forgotten for millennia. This was one such forgotten gallery, empty and sterile, sealed directly after its creation. No construction debris marred its shining black stone floor. Not even dust settled on the empty display plinths. But before the intruder lay a group of work scarabs. They lay on their backs like stones collecting together in a river, spindly legs pointing skywards to harvest ambient energy waves to power their dormant energy banks. The intruder stirred his metal fingers over the mindless drones, casting an interstitial command that awakened them from their slumber. He followed by interlocking his fingers in the hexagram of Thule, severing them from their security network. He knelt down to their level, leaning heavily on his staff. For a moment he paused to admire the aquamarine plates of their carapace, gold filigree set in geometric circuit patterns inlaid on their jeweled casings. The Hilak dynasty, the intruder thought, sighing. So rich, yet so vulgar. Not even the lowest scarab escapes your garish eye. Then, leaning down to the awakened scarabs, he whispered where he wanted to go. Legs skittering on the hard surface floor, almost in excitement. Then the swarm departed as one, milling around the intruder and passing over his clawed feet in their haste to direct him to the proper corridor. Orican the Diviner, master astronomer of the Sautek dynasty, architect of time, the last seer of the Necron tier, followed them. Trazen stepped out of the wormhole and closed it behind him. No one else would be coming back. It had been a near-run thing, much closer than he would have liked. With the wild spirit bleeding power, the panicking Eldari savage had overwhelmed the Lich Guard defending the temple's gateway and forced themselves inside. Trazen had fled upward, climbing lizard-rib stairways to an upper gallery and used his obliterator to blast a passageway through the Wraithbone dome. The Night Scythe had been waiting for him outside, hovering upside down to protect the captive wormhole on its belly. Its wings scored black to black metal by shuriken volleys, peppering it from below, gold and green decorative dermits flaking off like rust. Trazen got a glimpse of the Eldari temple complex. The rainforest canopy far below him, broken here and there by monoliths and bone arches, before he leapt onto the underside of the scythe, strode across its pitted skin and dropped into the wormhole. He left the scythes with an order to return, or if too heavily damaged, expend all ammunition, then ram a high-priority target, preferably one of those cursed carnosaurs. Chief Archivist, Overlord, Master, Saneth the Light Sculptor, Trazen's chief curator, knelt, his 8-fingered hands splayed on the polished floor in obeisance. Solemnness rejoices at your return. Does it? Trazen responded, looking around the receiving party. It was just Saneth, accompanied by an archived wraith, ready to receive the artifacts. Behind them, a hallway wide enough to refurbish a battle barge stretched empty for thousands of cubits. I see. Solemnness was not rejoicing. Indeed, it would not celebrate anything, but by Trazen's calculations for 10 millennia or more. Solemnness was a dormant world. Its officials, warriors, and servants in the stasis death of the Great Sleep. Only Trazen had awakened early, and he needed a mere skeleton crew to keep the world running at the standard he preferred. A successful endeavour, my lord. Trazen swept a hand over the stasis caskets of the Wraith's back. The jewelled boxes opened, pale wisps of blue vapour curling from their interiors. Trazen set the gem into the larger box and closed the lid manually, ensuring it locked. He nestled the tesseract labyrinth containing the Eldari war host in the smaller box, giving its top a merry tap for good measure. My lord, is this for the archive or display? Saneth conjured, a stylus out on his necrodermis, and held it expectantly over the phosglyph projection tablet that hovered in his hand. The primitives shall be displayed in the Eldari Diaspora Gallery with the rest of their kin. Between the craft welders and Drakari displays, I assume. The stylus danced on the light of the hologram tablet as Saneth spoke. Normally a Necron would not need such a thing, but like many who had arisen from the Great Sleep, Saneth's neural matrix had degraded over 60 million years. The deterioration had affected his short-term mnemonics. The deterioration had affected his short-term mnemonics. He could remember chains of code hexes, yet failed to recall what he had just said. The constant note-taking, obnoxious as it was, helped with that. Auditory information could not imprint on his engrams, but the tactile experience of writing the words created a workaround. Though he could no longer serve as the cryptech he'd once been, Trazen valued him for his skill with hard-like hologram projections, the method he had chosen to display his collection. Everyone has their damage. Of the few who'd already arisen, several of the old highborn of Necrontyr emerged not knowing their names. Others were complete automatons, or even mad. In dark moments, Trazen feared that in 10,000 years, when the dynasties began to awaken in full, he would find all of his peers had diminished. Not he, though. Trazen had emerged with his faculties entirely intact. My lord, Sanet cocked his head, his aperture of his single cyclopic eye narrowing. Permission to repeat the question? You may. And what shall I do with this gem? The gem, Trazen mused. He folded his hands and tapped his index fingers together with a soft tink, tink, tink. Upon reconsideration, I will handle this specimen myself. He opened the box and scooped up the precious stone, feeling its warmth, and stowed it amongst the collection of trinkets hanging at his hip. The determination will have to wait pending appraisal, of course, but this may be one of the oldest objects yet collected. Meet me in the War in Heaven gallery. Trazen turned to go, summoning his catacomb command barge with a thought, and stopped. An interstitial message burned in the corner of his vision. The holographic phosglyphs casting a jade glow on Trazen's death mask. Security glyphs blinked on its message seal. He opened the message, unfurling it downward like a scroll, absorbing the technical data like the calculation machine he was. What's this, Sanet? Sanet opened an identical alert. Exhibit breach in the Dawnwood sector, Gallery MXX3. Gallery 123. Thoth subcontinent. Coordinates 52.941.472. Negative 1.174056. The Hrud Burrow ecosystem, Trazen snarled. He conjured a holographic image. The image was dim in color, tinged with the green corpuscent of the cryopraise projection, but the visuals were crisp and comprehensible. A barrel-shaped container of earth, 4,000 cubits wide and 3,000 tall, floated in sensor fields at the center of the vast chamber. Long-limbed creatures milled about the top, struggling from holes in its surface. Trazen sliced at the hologram with his fingers, and it split. And it split in two like a cutaway schematic. On the inside of the earthen plug, tunnels wormed their way between vaulted worship chambers, the earthen family burrows. Hrud scrambled upwards, sensing their moment to escape had come. After all, they had been imprisoned inside hard-light holograms, caught like insects in amber, for at least 2 millennia. Thoughts frozen at the moment of their acquisition, with only the most astute and neurologically gifted sensing that any time had passed at all. Those races steeped in the Empyrean, for whom the tides of the warp were part of their very makeup, tended not to fare as well. They tended to go mad. Like these Hrud, for instance, tearing each other apart with their shovel-like digging claws, spattering odd, vicious flesh on the tunnel walls. Strange arms, articulated like a spine, doubled in on themselves as they struck at each other like drovers whipping at a herd. Seismic activity? Asked Trazyn. That was usually the cause. No reports of stasis failure on the tectonic plates, Lord Archivist, Sanet replied. Tesseract restart protocol and stasis containment not answering. Deploy the containment phalanx, Trazyn said, with swiftness. And hurt the exhibits, Lord. They're panicking, trying to dig out, Trazyn said, pointing at the milling creatures choking the corridors. A few had split off, and were tearing at the walls, trying to find the sunlight they so despised. Anything but the creatures of claustrophobic dark. Anything but the centuries of claustrophobic dark. I have at least 10,000 more HRUD in storage, but Dead Gods knows when I'll acquire another intact burrow. Act now, and we can minimize tunnel and gallery collapses and repopulate the display. Sanet's multi-jointed fingers danced over a floating glyph panel, making Trazyn recall the waving sea anemones of the Wild Spirit Chamber. Immortals, Lord? Indeed. Reality cracked and sizzled among the panicking HRUD. Green energy blossoms searing into being as the Immortals translated to the display's surface. HRUD dropped, arms knotting and beating the ground in spontaneous seizure. Lesser creatures, Trazyn reflected, so vulnerable to translation proximity. He made a mnemonic record of the thought, factoring it into his next acquisition venture. Wasteful to harm a specimen unnecessarily, the Immortals swung their double-barreled Gorse blasters up as one and picked their first shot. Each one acquired a different target. No redundancy, no wasted effort, no need to strategize. Networked combat algorithms meant every Immortal knew the other's next action. They tracked their firing solutions, and they waited for the order. Execute, said Trazyn, sending the impulse command even before the words left his lipless mouth. Ropey beams of energy erupted from their Gorse blasters, pulling the HRUD apart from the inside out, coiled electricity melting their flesh like hot breath dissolves frost. Viridian lightning raced from the emitter chambers of Tesla carbines, dancing through the crowded knots of alien bodies, lighting spot fires in their filthy robes where it lanced through them. Before the alien screams crescendoed, before the tangled stream of HRUD could reverse their flight and take shelter to the tunnels, before even the crack of the Tesla carbines ended, the Immortals picked new targets and fired again. Tesla cannons stay above ground, ordered Trazyn. Dial back Gorse blasters. Enable beam limiters to affect flesh and blood only. Any being who so much as scorches a bas relief in the burrow chapels gets remade into a mining scarab. Will you supervise personally? Inquired Sanet. Trazyn had planned to, of course, stream his consciousness down into one of the Immortals, ensure the job was done right, and yet Trazyn had no palms to itch, no spine to tingle, no stomach to knot when he sensed a thing out of place. Yet he still possessed a subconscious. It was an irony of the Necron race that, despite all their technological mastery, the workings of their own minds remained mysterious. Trazyn's neural systems had been wrought by the transcendent star gods, whose ways were mysterious and vicious. Trazyn did not understand how it was possible, but there were still things locked away in his mind, buried, felt rather than known, like a sense of danger. He continued a phosglyph panel, split it into 5 sections, and searched through the inscription code, slowing his chronosense so that he could process libraries of data in seconds. Lord, fault protocols should have caught the Tesseract failure, he said. They did, Lord Archivist, but they failed. Obviously, he sneered, pointing. The protocol should have been instantaneous. Instead, why it took 2 microseconds? Why? Aging systems? Solemnace is... He caught Trajan's look and trailed off, casting his monocular downwards as he searched for a euphemism that would not besmirch his overlord's beloved gallery. Historic? And the alert systems, they were unaffected by this fault, I suppose. He looked down on his cryptek. This is sabotage, and not clumsy sabotage. Show me all completed door activations and curatorial assets. Lord I... Odd. Save the commentary for manuscript analysis, he snapped. Report. I have a gate activation in the reserve gallery space. Several. 2 standard solar orbits ago. Encryption key matches a swarm of maintenance scarabs that are not listed as active. Headed where? Lights eternally burned in the War in Heaven gallery. It was the only way Trajan could stand to come here. He was not a superstitious being. Losing one's soul, after all, tended to dampen one's fear of the mystic. And the great necropolis capital of ancient Necrontyre, filled with a blighted, death-obsessed people, was funereal long before his species had imprisoned their minds inside bodies of deathless necrodermis. Indeed, stasis crypts covered Solemnus, each of his billions of subjects nestled in a sarcophagus that sustained their cold metal bodies. It was the same on tomb worlds across the galaxy. But just because one was dead did not mean he could not be haunted. And Trajan entered this chamber of memory with bowed head and soft steps, even when he was not expecting an ambush. He kept to the deep shadows, reshaping the necrodermis on the bottom of his feet into a spongy wire lattice that cushioned his armoured tread. He kept focus, forcing himself not to look into the rows of plinths that surrounded him, in double lines like a pharaoh's honour guard. They were enemies here. And Eldari stood mid-leap, the tip of her wraithbone danced slipper barely kissing the black display base. Next, a hulking Krork, mountainous shoulders bunched and slick with battle sweat. A Cainite warrior in green armour, crouched low, wide legs, weaving his chainsword forward and up as if hooking it under the Lich Guard's shield. A Jokero maintenance slave. And across from them, blank dummies wearing the resplendent armour of the ancient Necrontyre. A reminder of a time when they needed armour, before their bodies were living metal. The old times. 65 million years gone. The flesh times. Their long shadows met in the centre, mingling as if they still battled. Trajan remembered the war. As chief archivist, he had attended every clash that logistics allowed, recording impressions, taking samples, attending the embalming of each great pharaoh that fell to the old ones and their twisted creations. These were old mnemonics, blurry like image plate negatives cooked by heat, burned away by the process of biotransference that had placed him in this eternal body. He could not even remember what his old body had looked like. At times his mind reconstructed an image, or what he thought was an image, for a microsecond. The curve of long fingers gripping a stylus, dark pupils staring back from a burnished mirror, gone, always gone. The moment his mind's eye tried to focus on it, the self-proclamation protocol, the self-protection protocol. What came after the flames? That was clearer. Titanic clashes, armies of metal marching with dire purpose into faltering lines of the reptilian Old Ones. Imhotep the Stormlord, carving through the piteous Ancient Ones like the Necron-tiered death god they'd discovered was all too real. The dead gods, the ones he had helped murder, mouths afire as they feasted on innumerable suns. And then those Eldarian Krork. Beings so adept at their own particular aspect of violence, one all rage and clamour, the other grace and silence. These intrusive mnemonic routines ran in the background, passing in the span of a finger snap as he stalked forward. Primary subroutines looking for evidence of the intruder, scry filters layering over his oculars, searching for security anomalies. He could see the stasis field surrounding each plinth, shimmering like the air above a candle flame, protection against seismic violence in this most precious of galleries. The bulbous, ever-growing swell of the magnetic fields pressed against each other, ensuring that nothing save Trazyn could pass without triggering an alarm. Then he saw the hex, and relief flooded his cold hydraulics, because to think about this problem meant banishing thoughts of the past. Two magnetic fields had been parted where they met, pinned back with technomantic hexes that burned with the blue-white glow of arcing electricity. Occult glyphs engraved on the very skin of reality. Trazyn was no sorcerer. He had little talent for the occult arts and less patience. Besides, he was an overlord. He had cryptex to deal with that sort of thing. Delegation was one of the chief joys of power. Yet, Trazyn knew hex work. He could appreciate the fineness of the calligraphy and radiant strength inherent in the technoplasm. He took mnemonic image records for his cryptex as he ducked through the break in the field. Trazyn nearly missed the curse snare just beyond it. Would have if he'd been anywhere else. Yet he knew every atom of the place, and noticed the void-black glyphs on the ebony floor just before he was put past their hexagonal boundary. Chronomancy, he thought. He conjured his emphatic obliterator and touched the glowing tips to the border. Be gone, he wheeled, feeling his power course into the staff. The hex snare gutted and died, snuffed out of existence as if it had never been. Perhaps it had not. Now, the relic imprisoned in the obliterator, able to warp reality at times, was a product of an ancient and forgotten wizardry. Wizardry that Trazyn was eager to visit upon the form of Orican, for only the diviner would be so bold. Trazyn found the Astromancer where he least expected him. There were so many precious things in the War in Heaven gallery. Power plants of unknown manufacture, command diadems worn by the pharaohs of antiquity, an Eldari skimmer in the colours of a vanished clan, and above all those stasis displays floated a great metal conqueror worm, seated on the planets the Necron fleet bypassed to hunt their population to extinction. This gallery, the old Necron-tier gallery, was naught but mournful curiosities. Scrolls from when his kin still had eyes to read. Long tar pipes so pleasurable that those who had mouths to smoke them Long tar pipes, so pleasurable to those who had mouths to smoke them. A cane turned from hard wood, inlaid with ivory, its head shaped like the old hook-beaked god of wisdom. Trazen knew the feel of that old god well. He spent too much of his biological life leaning on that cane. And in the centre of this melancholy chamber stood Oricon, weaving hexes upon the air. Trazen is no fool, Oricon thought. Or at least, he was not a complete fool. He'd been fool enough to take such a small force down to the Exodite world, for instance. A force that was so easily besieged once Oricon warned the primitives he was coming. A delicious irony to pillage Trazen's cultural treasures while he was away plundering the backwater world of some feral Eldari. But that foolishness was recent compared to what Oricon saw around him, for it had been Trazen's crowning folly to build this palace, devoted to his boundless, undying energies, to a museum few of their blank-eyed kin would appreciate. Was the Necrons fully awakened, after all? How many of them would even be sane? Then again, the fool had proven far more resilient than Oricon's divination models had predicted. His escape from the Exodites, for instance, occurred with a speed Oricon's calculations had not considered probable. And that was Trazen, wasn't it? Born under fortunate stars, always the statistical outlier, never having to work for it, the bastard. It could be the place abnormal chrono streams threw off his powers and divinations. Intrusions from the Immaterium snarled the calculations, and this planet, well, Solemnace was a nightmare. So many objects and beings out of place, held ageless in stasis fields and tesseract vaults. 10,000 discrete timelines worth of chrono noise. You could feel it even on the edge of the sector. A great cataract on the eye of the universe. A blood clot in the time stream. Solemnace would have to fall someday, but right now it was not his main concern. But the trash data had snarled his predictions more than once during his infiltration. Oricon had been forced to reverse his paces and sabotage the Hrud burrow to provide a distraction. Thankfully, he had all the time in the world. Hexes and zodiacs burned around him, floating in the ether, pinning back layers of magnetic fields and diverting sensor beams back to receivers, masking his presence from the environment sniffers. All those layers of security for one inert object. Trazen either had some inkling of what this object did, or he was the most paranoid being in the galaxy. Or perhaps the Overlord of Solemnace believed that if something should be done, it should be overdone. Typical Nihilak attitude. It had taken Oricon three Necrontier solar years just to get to this point, gingerly peeling back each layer of security. Nearly there. The final stasis field shimmered a gossamer blue as Oricon wove the spell. Third finger and thumb of his left hand pressed together, marking the triangular borders of the working. Right hand dancing inside, like a harpist's, painting glyphs forgotten by most of the ancient days. Hexes so forbidden that in the flesh times any who spoke them aloud would have his teeth pulled and tongue branded. Perfect. He put his fingers together, spoke the final invocation, and snapped them. The hex flared to life, dripping purple sparks where the borders held back the field. Oricon tentatively put a metal finger to the centre of the working and pushed it forward. Horns blared, gongs crashed, chamber lights snapped into the full burn of midday. Bastard. Oricon's olfactory transducers picked up on the hint of gorse flares powering up. Bastard! The beam hit him in the head, his reinforced golden headdress stripping, the beam drilling towards his precious neural spools. Orokin slowed his chronosense, ignoring the alarming heat on his cranial chambers, where he could feel his mnemonic banks beginning to smoke. The beam drilled, slowed, stopped. Pain, or what pain Orokin felt out of usefulness, paused between throbs. The shower of sparks from his field cutting hex dribbled and shut off. A frozen waterfall of electricity. Orokin completed the mental ritual, thought the words, and ran the chants through a verbal emitter in his wickering tail to ensure the incantation was not altered by the extreme heat engulfing his skull. The beam withdrew, his cranium rebuilding itself. Sparks flowed upwards into the border of the hex. Horns and wargongs sounded in reverse, their long reverberations building to the crescendo of the first strike or blow. Hard lights shut off. His hands, independent of him, wove backwards, unmaking the spell, and he saw it. A Hecate glyph insufficiently drawn. One of the staffs branching from the upper orb was unconnected, a space of 2 microns separating the spear of the line of the curve of the circle. It was what made the astronomer discipline such a difficult one. Mastery requires total precision, total focus, and when one used arithmancy to shape time and space, even the slightest error mattered. And with overlapping hexes and this complicated, errors were easy to make. Even musing on Trazyn, though it was but a stray thought, in a tertiary subroutine, had been enough to force an error. This was why he'd been living the last 20 minutes over and over again. 3 years cumulative to get from the first plinth to the object that lay within. Orokin took a breath. Unnecessary biologically, but critical to focus, and redrew the hex. Then he activated the working and reached inside. Felt his metal hand, cold and gentle, close around the artifact, bring it out of the field. A perfect tetrahedral pyramid, shaped from living metal. Glyphs glistened on its surface, iridescent in the low light. Veins of crystalline substance marbling through the structure. Puzzle box, celestial compass, key. Depending on what you believed, it might be any of these things. And he believed it was much, much more. The Astrarium Mysterious, breathed Orokin. Interesting, replied Trazyn. I had wondered what that was. Archivist. Orokin paired the greeting with a polite bow. It achieved the proper depth and angle for a greeting of equal colleagues, but remained just shallow enough to communicate contempt. Astromancer, said Trazyn, returning the bow with a nod. A proper gesture for an overlord greeting guests on his own world, serving as both welcome and warning. It was consequently identical to the dueling bow. Had you announced your arrival, I would have arranged an honor guard. A figure of your reputation should not be wandering around here alone. Kind and proper, my colleague, kind and proper. Orokin moved sideways, insectile, but I would not trouble you, especially since, for a planetary overlord, you are so often away from Solemnos. They were circling each other now, pretense dissolving. They'd long been rivals, back to the flesh times, and Trazyn had frequently imagined what it would be like to land a blow on the diviner, but Orokin's movements unnerved him. The curse of biotransference had made parodies of them all, but none more extreme than he and Orokin. While Trazyn had been remade into a hunched hooded thing, the scholar eternally at his work. Orokin's slight frame had twisted to reflect the soul within. He was all things quick and venomous. His face and headdress recalled a hooded serpent. His curled tail, segmented back armor, and spindly limbs echoed the waste scorpions of the old capital. Divination orbs span down. Divination orbs ran down his spine, swirling with cloudy energy. A single baleful ocular mocking hid the foresight the cryptex claimed to possess, gleamed with haughty malice. Thievery is beneath you, Orican. Hand back the trinket, and perhaps we can continue your research. Hand back the trinket, and perhaps we can continue your research under supervision. After all, I of all beings can understand the wish to covertly acquire. Understand? Orican snapped. To understand is not in you, Trazen. You're a bird building a nest with shiny things, a child with a rock collection. You want things simply to have them. Their true meaning, their use, is lost on you. Hurtful, chided Trazen. He dipped his obliterator so it pointed at the device in Orican's hand. Even if true, I see no reason why that allows you to steal my things. You stole it first, from the Aminos dynasty. The Aminos dynasty is naught but inert metal now. You can't steal from the dead. That's called archaeology. The point is to memorialize, learn, study what came before us. We look to the past to navigate the future. I prefer to look to the future to navigate the future, said Orican. For instance, there were 27 times I could have attacked you just now, but none would have got past your guard. Indeed, but 28 is a slaying blow. It came faster than Trazen thought possible. He slowed his chronosense, but it did no good. Orican leapt his left and conjured his star-headed staff. In Trazen's enhanced oculars, the jagged supernova head of the weapon blurred, the chronofield boiling around it. He was speeding himself up, his weapons up, creating a pocket of reality where time moved faster than a jagged sun cut right past his obliterator and sheared through his upper left arm with a shriek of parting metal and a gush of sparks. It buried himself in his upper rib cage and kept cutting. Trazen felt it lodge in his central reactor. A flash, battery acids and reactor fluid spouted in the air. Flecks dotting Orican's leering death masks where they sizzled like oil on an engine. Trazen went down on one knee. Thus ended Trazen, called Infinite, mocked Orican, twisting his staff deeper, Lord of Solemnness, Keeper of Trinkets, Peerless in Arrogance, Lord of Forgotten. And then he stopped, because the face before him was not Trazen, but a mere Lichguard. The obliterator swung from behind him, catching the diviner on his segmented back plates as he twisted to evade. It connected with a flash of searing light, a brightness so pure it overwhelms Trazen's oculars, refracting and scattering in the lenses so the world disappeared for a moment, then snapped back, painted in prismatic rainbow hues. The blow took Orican off his feet, sent him crashing into a display case, shorting out the stasis field and denting the plinth with his shoulder plate. Ceramic ritual urns atop the plinth, their cracks painstakingly hardened with period-correcting resin. Rocked and steadied, Trazen picked up the fallen puzzle box. I like to keep a spare body in the gallery, he chuckled. So much faster to stream my consciousness into than come by barge. Translation can destabilize the stasis fields, you know. Orican tried to rise, legs twitching, sparks crackled from his broken spine. So, my valued colleague, Trazen said, let's have a short symposium, shall we? You refer to this as the Astrarium Symposium. You refer to this as the Astrarium Mysterios. But surely you don't believe it's the real thing? Most likely a copy. A curiosity meant to represent the object of legend, yes? You don't know what you have. Orican's vocal emitters buzzed and skipped from the power overload, interrupting his crow-like voice. He pulled himself along the floor, hauling his crippled form upright so he leaned against the plinth, twitching legs trailing unnaturally to the side. Always a slave to the past. Even if you knew what it was, you wouldn't process the vision to use it. Trazen opened his palm and cast a stasis field, pinning the divine in place from the second vertebrae down. Slave to the past? A lack of vision? Perhaps, my dear astromancer. Perhaps. Trazen tossed the puzzle box in the air and caught it again, delighting as Oricon's monocular widened in distress. The casualness was feigned. He'd plotted the object's arc 200 times before making the throw, and put it gingerly into his dimensional pocket. But you were a slave to your visions, with no sense of the past. I suppose it is our natures, yes? My lot to preserve, yours to predict. Oh yes, I see that you do not like that word. Predict. No doubt you think it clumsy. Well, I have a prediction for you, dear Oricon. He released his obliterator. It stood immobile, balanced on its pointed haft, and held a hand to his steely forehead, as if glimpsing the ethereal. A vision of your own future. The glassy floor rumbled as ancient tomb doors grated open. Monoliths rose around the gallery, scraping against the time-worn slabs as they ground from their stasis chambers. Inside each stood a sarcophagus niche. Inside each stood a sarcophagus niche, surrounded with milky green fog. The vapor washed heavily towards the floor, lit from within like storm clouds, as animation systems crackled to life. And as it sank, the fog revealed crested helms, dispersion shields, and bladed weapons stood ready in inert hands. A phalanx of lich guards, eye sockets dark. In my vision, Trazen continued, I see you as a permanent addition to this gallery. You are, after all, a priceless antique, are you not? Oricon the Diviner, seer of the Necrontyr, maker of predictions, who warned our kind against accepting the deceiver's horrific bargain. He chuckled, raised the Astrarium Mysterios. I think I'll put you somewhere you can gaze on this, just out of reach. For eternity. The worst thing about biotransference, said Oricon, his voice recovering, is that the flesh times, you at least stopped to breathe every once in a while. Trazen laughed. I've always envied your acid tongue. He rapped the floor twice with his obliterator staff. Perhaps I'll display it separately. The Lichguard's eyes flared as one, popping like fusers. They lowered long war scythes, snapped shields into positions, and advanced. A contracting circle of metal closed on the diviner. You call me a predictor, Trazen, spat Oricon, but mere prediction is no longer of use to me. What use are visions when the powerful refuse to heed them? You march to your doom, believing the deceiver's promises over my auguries. Why speak truth to those that choose to be deaf to it? Hyperphase blaze, vibrating in and out of reality, drew closer around the diviner. Energy fields sizzled in the dry air of the hermetically sealed chamber. They were 30 steps away, then 20. Since you all turned your back on me, my powers have grown, said Oricon, and I have changed my focus. Trazen could see the astromancer's cranial coolants were running at triple capacity, beads of condensate plumping on the golden hood and running down to sizzle on his long skull. Why predict the future when I can reshape it? Said Oricon. How exactly? Said Trazen. Then to the Lichguard, mind the artifacts. How else do you shape the future? Oricon said, a smile in his avian voice. He fixed Trazen with a stare. By destroying the past? Trazen saw the blow just as Oricon's head twitched. He threw himself forward, shouting on On an interception trajectory, he knew he could not succeed. There was no way to be faster than a chronomancer. Oricon's head slammed backwards into the plinth behind him. Metal dented and cracked. Levitator arrays shorted out. The eggshell-thin ceramics, rotating like priceless constellations, dropped. The diviner spoke an arcane word that burst the stasis field and scrambled out of the way. Hands clawing for purchase on the floor, half-functioning feet launched him off the plinth, slamming the ground like pistons to drive himself forward, scrambling, then crawling. As he moved, his body superheated, welding damaged pieces together. Ghostly vapor twisted up from severed vertebrae of his spine, cables seeking each other out like bloodworms sniffing for a mate. Trazen cared not. He dived for the falling relics, slowing his chromosense to try and make a decision. It was mathematically impossible to save all of them. But he could save one priceless example of Necrontyr ceramic work. Working angles and probabilities, he chose a bright purple jar, Sautek, 4th Dynasty, a scene from the midsummer sky above Necrontyr homeworld, a starfield shining through the glaze of twilight. It fell directly into the cup of his hands, so focused it was that Trazen could see the imprint of the potter's fingertips beneath the bright paint. The Necron hands were not meant to handle such fine pottery. It contacted his palm and crushed inwards, cracks shooting through it, as if a summer lightning storm had split the sky of Trazen's half-forgotten homeworld. His chronosense dialed back to its slowest. Every moment of the jar's destruction played out in individual tragedies. Around him, ceramics fell like hail, scattering painted shards as they smashed against the floor. "Barbarian!" Trazen roared, his restoration protocols already running a damage analysis, matching potsherds by break pattern and sorting artistic styles. He shouted command to the Lich Guard. "Nealak, 12th Dynasty, kill him. Thokt, 19th Dynasty, kill him. Ogderbek, 13th Dynasty, kill him!" Orkan called the fallen staff tomorrow to his hand, as if it were a living thing. The first Lich Guard bore down on him before he could stand aside. A mistake. Orican scuttled backwards like a crab, thrusting his haft at the Lich Guard's oculars. When the Tomb Guard raised his dispersion shield, the diviner scythed the staff in low, the blazing halo of his headpiece severing both legs at the ankles. As the guard fell, Orican sprang to his feet, slamming the pointed half of his staff into the fallen warrior's segmented throat. He shot an electrostatic discharge through the staff and overloaded the foe's neural matrix. The warrior's oculars, awakened after 60 million years of sleep, winked out. Orican ducked, a war scythe passing a finger's span over his head. He kicked out backwards, destabilizing the opponent, and broke off, dodging behind a display of gold-inlaid smoking pipes to buy himself a moment. The Lich Guard recovered and stalked towards him. "Idiot! Ceramics!" shouted Trazen, hastily casting a stasis field around the ruined shards. "Watch where you step!" The Lich Guard stalled, turned, went around. They stalked a wide perimeter outside the priceless debris field. Their circular formation growing ragged, holes in the net developing, as one group pressed in faster than the other. Orican circled around the pipe display, keeping it between him and the closest guards. His back momentarily shielded by the broken ceramics. "Surrender the mysterious, Trazen, and this can end. You have broken all covenants, Astramaster, sir. All rules of protocol, destroyed the last examples of our worlds." Orican planted his foot against the display and shoved. For a sickening instant, it creaked over like an axe tree. The racks of pipe held in impossible symmetry until the stasis field gave out and they crashed down at the advancing Lich Guard's feet. "Stop!" Trazen pleaded. The ancient pipes shattered, bowls that once held dream tar husbanded in forgotten temple gardens, scattered broken among the feet of the Lich Guard, who froze mid-step, torn between command to advance and the one that prevented them from damaging the artifacts. Orican put his shoulder against a case of surgical instruments and heaved, grabbed a disintegrating scroll and threw it across the chamber like a streamer, completing his barrier of antiquities. His own warding circle of defacement, the Lich Guard halted, awaiting orders. "If you wish to treat with me, scribe, come inside." Trazen obliged, vaulting the debris, channeling power through his leap, his obliterator swinging down like a great hammer. It drove down on Orican's staff, the iron clang of them meeting echoing off the walls. For an instant, the lodestones of their weapon touched, sizzling and popping like power cables in water. Trazen shoved the diviner backwards with the haft of his obliterator. Then the staff swirled and clashed again, wheeling so fast they left spectral fans of energy in their wake. "Vandal!" Trazen roared, thrusting his obliterator like a spear. "You have destroyed objects made by craftsmen dead long before we breathed. Pieces of our past that can never be remade." Orican parried, rolling the blow upwards and leaping aside to avoid the downward chop that followed it. Useless things, fetishes of a vanished past. Trazen reversed his obliterator and slapped the staff into Orican's side, staggering the diviner. The chronomancer backpedaled, wisps of radioactive aurora twisting from the burn in his lower thorax. Trazen came on again, his fury burning. Circuits flared hot. Vicious electrofluid pumped through his system like magma. Neither of them were warriors. For Trazen, the dust of the archive was more familiar than that of the parade ground, and Orican had spent eons training his mind and neglecting his body. Had this duel occurred during the Flesh Times, it would have been comical. Two withered ancients, rangy, round-shouldered, stained with ink and smelling of incense, tearing at each other with barely the strength to bruise. But biotransference had, for all its horrors, made every Necron an armoured juggernaut. The two swung at each other, filling the gallery with sounds of the forge. They locked weapons, shoved and bashed their plated skulls like horned beasts. The Lich Guard looked on, impassive. They knew an aristocratic duel when they saw it, though none had seen one quite like this. Orican broke away, whirling. "Give me my Mysterios, Trazen." "I will tear you!" Orican sent the staff tomorrow spinning end over end across the chamber, its head burning the air so it left the afterimage of a discus as it slid into a case of antiquities. "No!" Trazen smashed the obliterator down. The diviner met it with the logarithm of Sully, a conjuring swirl of ochre void that he wielded like a buckler. Incompatible realities clashed, the solar flare of the ancient weapon meeting the lightless ether of a black fire that extinguished the tiny portal and threw the obliterator from Trazen's grip. Such was the fury he had not. Trazen leapt upon the astromancer and beat him with his bare fists. Each clashing blow left imprints on the living metal of Orican's necrodermis. Orican tried to scuttle out from under the archivist, but Trazen grabbed a string of ritual tiles and dragged him back so roughly that one tile sheared off in his grasp. Alarms going and trumpet klaxons filled the air. Swarms of restoration scarabs crawled down the walls like curtains, their auto-instinctual protocols calling them to preserve the scene. Trazen saw none of it. His oculars were deep focused on Orican, fists slamming down over and over, sparks showering from each other. The diviner laughed. Bodies as resilient as theirs could do little damage without the aid of phase weapons and flayers. Yet Trazen kept hammering, beating the diviner into the floor until he felt weak. No, He was weak. Only then did he notice the diviner's questing tail wrapped around his throat, closing off his cable artery, pinching off the coolant that kept his neurals from overheating. Barbarian, Trazyn said, rolling to the side, his anger spent. Orican sprang to his feet, ready, called his staff. This can end, Archivist, he crowed. Surrender the Mysterios, and it will stop. Trazyn struggled to his feet, metallic dust from his pulverized floor shaking loose from his scaled cloak. Is it truly worth so much, Orican? He spread a hand at the destruction. What it is worth to me is immaterial, said Orican. The question is, what is it worth to you? Is it worth every object in this gallery? Because I am willing to pull this chamber in upon itself, if that is what is required. Our heritage, our legacy. If it is so important, sacrifice one to save all. Trazyn wiped his hands together, a nervous habit from a long time ago, so long ago, when they were eternally stained with ink. Calculations whirled in his matrices. If or then logic problems created and discarded. If he orders the Lich Guard to advance, the artifacts become irrecoverable, and Orican destroys the gallery. No. If he attacks Orican, then Orican continues his rampage. No. If he gives up the Astrarium Mysterios, Trazyn slid long fingers into his dimensional pocket and withdrew the Mysterios. Such a small thing. Insignificant, really. A curiosity. A replica of a mythical object that never existed. At least he had assumed so. Orican clearly thought different. A bargain, said Trazyn. His voice had a tinge of desperation, so alien that he saw two of the more sentient Lich Guards exchange a glance. You are a chronomancer, perhaps the greatest of your kind. You couldn't undo this destruction, it would be nothing for you. Orican paused, considering. I can. Then do it. First hand over the device. I'm not a simpleton, diviner. Orican spread his hands. You have me surrounded. Once restored, you may resume your interest in my, preservation. Shall I give away my one point of leverage so easily? Trazyn hesitated, stepped forward. Orican withdrew a step. Trazyn placed the puzzle box on the ground as carefully as if it were a newborn, and stepped back. Now, your part, he said. Orican's eye narrowed, and for a microsecond, Trazyn thought he detected regret in that gaze. He did not step forward to take the device. The difficulty, Trazyn, is that undoing the damage means travelling back in the timeline, before all this occurred. He met Trazyn's gaze. And if I did that, you would have no memory of this accord. Trazyn saw the transdimensional beamer. He knew what it meant. Canoptic wraiths use them to banish unwanted construction debris into extra-dimensional space, a large-scale version of the pocket dimension he kept at his own hip. Orican's snapshot caught the Mysterios, lancing it out of existence, sending it somewhere in the great nowhere. Trazyn dived for Orican, and the diviner turned the sidearm on himself. By the time Trazyn's hands got there, nothing occupied the space but empty air. Trazyn the Infinite, archivist of the Solemnus Galleries, stood in the centre of his ruined past and howled for revenge. My word, that was a long chapter. That was a long chapter, chat. That was long. My word. That was cool, though. I love the exploration of, like, what these Necrons are like. Also, I like how Trazen can remember what Oricon was like before Oricon did biotransference, but he's not able to remember what he's not able to remember who he used to be before that. That's kind of crazy. I love the idea that Lichguard just think that the way they fight is just hilarious. I also think it's funny that not all the overlords are in fact warriors. Some of them are just like dorky little nerds that have no idea how to fight, but because they're Necrons and they're giant death machines, they're just able to just be absolutely crazy. I love it. Also, Oricon is such a bastard so far. I didn't know what he'd be like, but wow. Wow. I didn't know what to expect about Oricon. And Trazen seems so hurt. Sounds like fuel for fanfics. Like this wonderful art up here. This art is by hang on, let me find the artist. Let me find the artist. When this goes up on YouTube, I'm gonna include the artist in chat because I wanted to DM them before I actually went live. It's by Cyberfab, who does a lot of Yuri. No, not a lot of Yuri. A lot of Yaoi art. A lot of Yaoi Necron art, lol. I thought it would be great. It would make a great little thumbnail. So, yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna put a link to that page. I wanted to DM them. If they get in touch and say they don't want me to use their art as thumbnail, I'll just take it down. I'll just change it to like the same thumbnail, but with like default settings, Infinite and the Divine. But I just thought it was funnier. I thought it was funnier. I really like the way Robert Rath writes combat. Like in these chapters, but like it just feels very cool. Cat experiences peak fiction, gets confused. I don't know who I want to like or hate so far. I want to do more, but like it's late. This chapter was really long, a lot longer than I thought it was gonna be. But I'm curious to see what's gonna happen next. That was so long though. That was so long. But yeah, this might be peak fiction. This might be peak fiction. I can't wait. I can't wait for more. When I've done this, I might read the new Tomb World book because I've got that coming soon. Or I might read the Tomb World book off stream and then do like a short YouTube video on it. That's what I'm thinking. And I'm also thinking maybe I just want to do I want to do more live streams like this because even though they're a bit more scuffed and maybe they're not edited and fancy, like I feel like it gets the whole reading segments done. It actually makes sure they get done and I can put them out at a bit more of a better pace. But yeah, I enjoyed this. Are you guys liking the way I'm reading it? Let me know your thoughts. Wow. Let me know your thoughts, chat.